have Tom from History Delights and Kevin behind the camera. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, how we doing to everybody? Hey, did you know that visiting old cemeteries is kind of a popular thing these days? And can't you find all kinds of neat stories
Yes.
behind those persons that are buried here, Kevin?
Yes.
Well, we're about to find out something here. Kevin was out here, it's been a few months ago. He found something very interesting. It's a tale of intrigue, corrupt politicians, moonshiners, a corrupt sheriff, and oh boy, let's go in and find out just what's going on. Before we go in, I'd just like to point out this is a Swan Lake Township Pioneer Cemetery, first opened in 1872. It's designated as a pioneer cemetery by the state of Iowa, which means there are no more burials here. This cemetery is a closed cemetery. So we step in here, and one of the first markers that we find is this broken stone here, and it says infant on it, and it was the son of a Hopkins, and he lived for one day. And this kind of piqued Kevin's interest, and so he did some digging, and well, this is where we're going to get into the story. Well, here again, erected to the memory of the early settlers of Swan Lake Township, and that would include a James Leander Hopkins. And he lived here in this township, and he was addressed as judge and referred to as a judge, but we're thinking he was more of a magistrate or a justice of the peace. James married a Rachel Ellis, and she became Rachel Ellis Hopkins. Both of them are buried here. Let's go around and see if we can find their tombstone. Well, Kevin, we've walked the whole cemetery, didn't find either stone, did we?
No, we did not.
They are listed as being buried here. I'm sure there's some sort of a list somewhere. However, I believe there's a lot of unmarked graves. Something has happened to the tombstones over the years. There's a lot of broken ones here. And it's very sorrowful because you sure do see a lot of infants buried here. Well, we're going to start our story, and this involves James Leander Hopkins. He was born on October 6, 1841 in Killingly, Connecticut. He enlisted in the 2nd Rhode Island Infantry on October 8, 1861. He was wounded at Salem Heights, Virginia.
He became a POW on May 6 of 1894 during the Battle of the Wilderness. He was brought to Jacksonville, Florida, transferred to Anderson Prison in Georgia. He was basically a POW to the end of the war. He was paroled on April 28, 1865.
James moved to Pocahontas County, Iowa, and showed up on the 1885 Iowa Census. He was living here in Swan Lake Township, Section 20. See what we go through to make these videos for us? We're in swarms of mosquitoes here. We're going to move along. His occupation was listed as a stonemason. He met his future wife, Rachel Ellis, who was living in Newell, Iowa. Rachel was born November 23, 1861. Rachel earned a living as a housekeeper.
They had 6 children. The first child died as an infant, and the 5th child was buried here in Swan Lake.
Did that go up your nose?
Nope.
This is one of the worst videos. I made you laugh. Stick with us, folks. We're going to get it going here. So they had 6 children. Their first child was Lewis, and he died as an infant. And he's buried in the Lorenz Cemetery with his grandparents. There was another infant, the fifth child, and we believe that's the grave right over there. He only lived for one day. And then their second child, Cornelius, he died in 1965 in Missouri. Another child, Albert, died in 1956 in Modesto, California. And Claire was born in 1889. She died in 1953 in San Mateo, California. And the 6th and last child, Ruth, was born in 1893 and died in 1930 in Kansas.
As James and Rachel died, their children were still young. Children were placed in the Iowa Soldiers Orphan Home in Davenport. James was a stonemason and a farmer. In 1885, he served as secretary at Swan Lake Public School and was in that position until 1892. In 1886, he also served as the Swan Lake Township tax assessor until 1893. To further confuse things, he was elected to the position of Swan Lake Town Supervisor. He served that position from 1891 to 1892. James belonged to the Democratic Party during this time. However, he was encouraged to switch to the Republican Party for his run as town mayor.
Wow, are these gnats terrible,
Yes.
aren't they?
Yes.
Okay, you stopped as town mayor. Now let us introduce Lewis Lang, who was the owner and editor of the Pocahontas Sun newspaper from 1885 to 1900. The newspaper was seen as a Democrat-run paper. The name of the paper was later changed to the Lorenz Sun. As mayor of Lorenz, Lewis, he was also the editor, Lewis was adamantly opposed to alcohol, and Lorenz was a dry town under his watch from 1892 to 1895.
At this time, we introduce the next character in this developing story. His name was S.H. Speckler, and he was a bootlegger. On July 9, 1891, a search warrant for Speckler's property in Lorenz had issued. The search discovered 100 bottles of rot gut whiskey. Now there is where the history gets a little fuzzy. We find a newspaper account on April 28, 1892 that Speckler was charged with illegal sale of liquor, and he was tried in front of Squire Whitman's court. The jury found him guilty. He paid a fine of $100, and he was supposed to have quit the business. To highlight the mayor, Lewis's Lang disdain for alcohol, the following editorial about Speckler appeared in December 10th of 1891 edition.
Okay, when the Sun stated a few weeks ago that every man who continued bootlegging in Lorenz would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, we meant just what we said. Forbearance sometimes ceases to be a virtue. It is not always, it seems, to a man's credit to work for peace and harmony in his town. At least it seldom seems to be appreciated. This editorial expressed Mayor Lang's frustration with the administration of justice when it comes to bootleggers. Well, let's move on to 1893 as campaign season had begun.
In October of 93, our friend, the bootlegger, Speckler, had not reformed his ways. He is once again selling beer in Lorenz. In November of 1893, James Hopkins was elected Justice of the Peace of Swan Lake Township. After Christmas of the same year, Mayor Lewis Lang had all the saloons closed down. Speckler took the hint and was not caught. All the captured liquor was stored in a room owned by the mayor. While the mayor was attending church services, someone broke into his room and stole all the liquor.
Someone stole the liquor on Christmas, huh? In February of 1894, we begin with a mayoral race in Lorenz. The bootlegger Speckler was recruiting candidates for mayor and city council. In other words, he wanted elected officials that would leave him and his bootlegging business alone. James Hopkins, our judge, who was still serving as Justice of the Peace of Swan Lake Township, decided to enter the race for mayor. He switched his party affiliation from Democrat to Republican. Hopkins was painted with the following brush. First, it's been represented that I am a friend and advocate of a saloon. Second, I also support billiard halls. Third, that my support comes from the worst element of our citizens, and that a vote for me is a vote to abandon all our old safeguards to peace and inaugurate a reign of almost anarchy. Hopkins responded to these allegations saying he did not favor saloons or billiard halls, and that he could not control those who supported him.
And an editorial from another county newspaper, the Raw Review, welcomed Hopkins to the Republican Party. Even further, they poked fun at the current Lorenz mayor, Lewis Lang, a Democrat, by saying morality never knew Lang if he is posing as a moral reformer. He betrayed you when you least expected it, and now we start getting to the heart of the matter. Speckler had been charged with bootlegging again and appeared in the court presiding over Mayor Lang. He was fined $50. This would have been based on a local ordinance. Speckler left for parts unknown. The grand jury had it convicted, and a warrant for Speckler's arrest was issued for the violation of the prohibited law. We assumed the charge was related to bootlegging. Speckler's returned to Lorenz and asked for time to pay for his original $50 fine, and the extension was granted.
To no one's surprise, Speckler returned to bootlegging. The authorities got word that Speckler was going to run again. A court document called a minimus was issued in order to take Speckler into custody. Authorities searched Lorenz and surrounding communities but did not find him. However, the town constable of Havelock, a neighboring town, found and arrested him. While this constable was taking the jailbird Speckler to Lorenz in a buggy, Speckler jumped out of the buggy and attempted to escape. However, the constable wasn't thwarted and he was able to re-apprehend him. Speckler offered a $10 bribe to the constable to let him go free, and the constable declined to receive the bribe. After arriving in Lorenz, Mayor Lang told the sheriff that the $50 fine should be paid or Speckler should be taken to the county jail. The deputy took Speckler in front of Judge Hopkins, and a bond was set for $300. What takes place during the evening hours, only God knows. This is where it gets spicy.
The following morning, Speckler was not in jail. The deputy sheriff seemed to be surprised that the jailbird had flown the nest. Judge Hopkins was accused of giving Speckler a straw bond. Mayor Lang wanted to know who provided the bond and where the bond money was. Judge Hopkins replied, "Go to hell. It's none of your business." It was later discovered that the bond had not been received by the bail bondsman. To wrap this all up, it appears that the judge, the deputy sheriff, were on the take, and Speckler bribed them. Deputy Sheriff Pease ended up resigning due to the controversy along these suspicious circumstances and moved away with his family.
Speckler disappeared but was seen in the area a couple of years later. The judge, however, disappeared also. He abandoned his wife and family, and no one knew where he had went. An all-points bulletin had been issued to try and locate the judge. About a month later, the proprietor of a boarding house in Austin, Minnesota, discovered the judge's dead body. He, the proprietor, told a police officer that the old man finally died last night. The officer asked, "What old man?" The proprietor told the policeman that the old man, going by the name of George Morris of St. Louis. Judge Hopkins, under the alias of George Morris, had deposited $500 in an Austin bank, but then withdrew it the next day. Only $105 was found in the care of the landlord.
What happened to the remainder of the money and his cause of death is still a mystery. Hopkins' body was interred here at Swan Lake Township Cemetery. His date of death is believed May 27, 1894. What happened to the rest of the judge's family is a tragedy. In 1895, Mrs. Hopkins took her children to the Soldiers' Orphan Home in Davenport. We assume that Rachel did this due to the fact that she was unable to take care of her children. Rachel died from consumption in November of 1897, and she was buried here at Swan Lake. As Speckler, he continued to be in and out of trouble, has never paid the $50 fine, served his jail time. He is known to be living in Coon Rapids as running a pool hall.
Well, that concludes this story. What a fascinating story. You just never know what history is right underneath you. And I want to thank Kevin once again for discovering this wonderful story and coming out here. And I think the judge is getting the last laugh because we have gnats galore here.